A father walks into his home and finds his teenage daughter's lifeless body on the floor. Next to her, another body, her bowling coach. Both are dead. But what was the coach doing there? And how did they die? I'm Kennedi Walker, and I'll walk you through the details. You're watching Law and Crime. This story takes us to Temperance, Michigan, just over an hour south of Detroit. 17-year-old Gwen Smith had just graduated from high school. Her family says she was smart, driven, and full of life. A great student, a gifted artist, and an athlete. Her sport of choice, bowling. But in a cruel twist of fate, that very sport may have played a role in her death.
On Saturday, June 14th, approximately 6 p.m., members of the Sheriff's Office were dispatched to 1641 West Stearns Road in Bedford Township, following a report of two deceased individuals that were found inside the home.
The grim discovery was made by Gwen's stepfather, returning home to find both Gwen and her bowling coach, 33-year-old Ryne Leist, dead inside of the house.
The manner of death, based on the coroner's report, for Gwendolyn was homicide. The manner of death for Ryan was listed as suicide.
The motive behind the murder remains a mystery. What led Gwen's bowling coach to show up at her home that day and how he got inside is also unknown. Investigators have not said whether Gwen let him in or if he forced his way inside.
The details of their relationship are not clear at this time, although it is believed that Gwendolyn did not consider the relation between the two of them to be romantic. The suspect gained entry into the home and shot Gwendolyn multiple times before taking his own life.
Now, investigators are combing through digital evidence, including messages exchanged between the two in the days before the shooting. Gwen's stepfather is pointing to what he called inappropriate emails sent by Leist. In a comment posted in a local Bedford Township Facebook group, he reportedly wrote, "I've seen enough of the emails he sent my daughter before he killed her to know it's not speculation. He deserves to rot in a special hell." That quote, according to the New York Post. None of these emails or accusations have been confirmed by police. Ryne Leist had been a volunteer coach for Gwen's high school bowling team. According to Local 4 Click on Detroit, the school district says Leist passed all required screenings. The superintendent reportedly saying Leist met the criteria, he completed the full background check, there was no sign that he was not a qualified hire and that something could go wrong. As police continue to search for answers, friends and family are grieving the loss of a young life taken too soon. In a statement shared to Facebook, the district wrote, "Gwen was an extraordinary young woman whose presence left an indelible mark on our school community. Gwen will be remembered for her kindness, her bright spirit, and the joy she brought to those around her." Police confirmed they believe the coach died by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And here to break down the story with me is Dr. Daniel Bober, a forensic psychiatrist. Dr. Bober, thank you so much for coming on today.
Great to be here.
So this case is chilling. 2 people dead and a coach accused of killing a 17-year-old. I mean, I know we hear the term murder-suicide a lot, but what's happening psychologically in those kinds of cases? Is there a typical profile or pattern?
Well, obviously, there's a lot we don't know. But what strikes me about this particular case is that there was a power differential, right? So you have a coach and someone who teaches bowling. And so there's sort of a power differential. The coach is a mentor of sorts, an authority figure. And then you have the age disparity, right? The alleged shooter was 33 and the victim was 17. So if this crime occurred at her house, to me, that feels very targeted, very planned. Obviously, there's a lot we don't know, but this seems like there may have been some kind of inappropriate romantic relationship. And maybe there was some sort of perceived rejection, betrayal, which led to rage. Maybe in some way he saw her as his possession, and maybe there was some kind of infighting going on where he developed a delusional fixation. But again, this is all pure speculation because we don't know the nature of their relationship.
This is a Law and Crime legal alert. If you received Depo-Provera birth control shots and were later diagnosed with a brain or spinal tumor called meningioma, you may be eligible for a lawsuit. Morgan & Morgan is investigating claims that patients weren't properly warned about this risk. It's free to check, takes just a few minutes, and you don't pay unless they win. So scan the QR code on your screen, click the link below, or go to forthepeople.com/LCDepo to see if you qualify. Right, and we'll dive into that in a moment, just trying to figure out what their relationship may have been. But there's often this big question of why in these cases. In your experience, are there ever truly any clear motives in murder-suicide cases, or is it usually more complicated?
So there are some common threads, and the common threads are this. When murder suicides occur, there's often a feeling of hopelessness, of desperation, that there's no other way out. And the people that commit these crimes are very emotionally dysregulated. They have trouble managing their emotions, exercising restraint. They get into this cognitive distortion or this black and white thinking where, again, there's no other option, there's no way out, this is the only way. And of course, access to lethal means, right? We know if there are firearms around, that it's more likely that these events will occur. And often the perpetrator will isolate themselves from their social support, the very people that could sort of say, wait, stop, you need to think this through. What are you talking about? They isolate themselves. And so they don't have that support system saying to them that there are other options, that they can seek help. And they perceive this as the only solution.
And that's really unfortunate that they think that this is their only way out, because we know that that's not the case. But when a coach or mentor crosses boundaries like this, what kinds of red flags, psychological or behavioral, should people look out for?
So, obviously, if they're spending more time with the person than they should be within the context of what they're supposed to be doing, if they're going out and they're having dinner, if they're spending time outside that, unique, specific relationship, that should be a red flag. Communication or excessive communication outside what would be necessary for the professional relationship, then I think that would raise a red flag.
Yeah, and then their huge age gap as well. I mean, this man was 33, Gwen was only 17. From a psychological standpoint, what does that kind of age gap tell us? And I know we already kind of dove into it a little bit, but basically, the power and trust, how does that play into situations like this, especially when the adult is in a leadership role like a coach or a teacher?
So, a teenager whose brain is still developing, who is emotionally immature, who maybe lacks the judgment or the behavioral control, is depending on someone like this who is really their mentor to guide them in the right direction, to make them feel safe, to make them feel heard and validated. And so that power differential exists and it is ripe for abuse. It can be abused by someone who wants to control that person for their own um, it can be abused by someone who wants to control that person for their own means. And so I think that's really the key here is that when you have that age difference, you're dealing with someone who doesn't have the emotional maturity, who lacks that responsibility for their actions to some degree, or at least not to the same degree as an adult, and can be manipulated and can be controlled.
If someone's dealing with rejection or unreciprocated feelings, especially towards someone younger, how does that spiral into something violent, like how we see here?
So I think, in some people who have what we call narcissistic injury, they don't handle rejection well. They feel betrayed, and it causes them to boil over into rage and they can act out violently. And a lot of times you will see this in a murder suicide where someone feels rejected and they have a poor sense of self and they have poor emotional regulation and they develop this delusional fixation on someone almost as if they're a possession and not a person. You belong to me. I own you. If I can't have you, no one will. And they act on those feelings.
That feeling of, or just the thought, if no one can have you, if I can't have you, no one will. I mean, how does anyone just get to that point of just being so controlling?
So these are people that often feel very inadequate themselves, and their approval of themselves is contingent upon the approval from the other person. Who knows? She may have been seeing someone else. He may have found out about it. He may have felt betrayed, rejected, and as a way to punish her, he killed her. Again, all speculation, a lot we don't know. I think a lot of it's going to come down to the social media, to the text messages between them. I'm sure there's going to be a whole trail of digital evidence that the authorities can go through that will help piece this together.
Absolutely. And we don't know how he got inside of the house, but let's say Gwen did not want him there. When someone forces entry and commits this kind of act, what might that say about their mindset?
Is that there's no stopping them, that they're determined no matter what, they're going to accomplish this. But listen, it's possible that because of their prior relationship, that she opened the door to him, that she let him in, that maybe he said to her, listen, let's have a conversation. I want to talk about things. We can't do this anymore. Let me just see you one more time. And she may have very willingly invited him into the home. And because there was still a position of trust there in her mind, she may have unfortunately opened herself up to this.
Right. And do you feel like there's a lot of entitlement in these cases as well? The idea that someone feels owed attention or affection?
I do, and and a lot of times in these people's minds, it's I did this for you. I was there for you when you needed me. You didn't have your family. I was there to coach you. I was there to guide you. I was a mentor to you, and this is what you give me in return. You reject me. You betray me, and now I'm going to make you pay.
And earlier you mentioned that this could be a personality trait, maybe like narcissism or control, but can this kind of behavior also stem from an underlying mental health disorder?
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the things that for me would be in the differential. Did this person suffer from depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia? Did they have a history of mental health treatment? Were they taking medication? Were they using substances? Were they using alcohol? Were they using other mind altering substances that could have affected their judgment? That is also something that we would need to consider.
And switching gears to some of the evidence that authorities may have. We know investigators are combing through emails and messages. You and I talked about this not too long ago, but from your perspective, what kind of digital clues might reveal someone's intent before an act like this? At what point do you think it went from, just a coach texting their player, their bowler, and it being friendly to where Gwen should have reported these text messages to adults? At what point does it cross that line?
Well, I think, when you look at these text messages, when you look at these direct messages on social media, I think you have to look at and again, it's very hard to read tone, right? Because by its very nature, it doesn't convey tone. But when you start talking about other things that go outside the relationship of a player and a coach, personal things, intimate things, things that, people who are engaged in this type of relationship should not be talking about. I think that's a clue that there was more going on here than him just being her coach. And to me, the problem is, a 17-year-old, they're not really a child. They're not 18 yet. They're not quite an adult, but I'm sure the parents of this child wanted to give her some sense of independence, some sense of autonomy and privacy. And so it sort of puts her in an awkward spot, right? She's not old enough really to be making adult decisions, but she's not a small child either. And so some parents will take the position that, hey, you're almost an adult, so we're going to let you have these private relationships with who you want. And so maybe they're not on top of it as much as they should be. I think it's a very awkward space for someone, especially an adolescent girl. I mean, I could talk to you so much about all the problems in this country that adolescent girls have with body image, with self esteem, depression, eating disorders. And so I think being a 17-year-old who's still young, who's still impressionable, who's still emotionally developing, I think it can be very difficult to be in that space, especially in this country.
I couldn't agree more. Well, let me ask you this. If someone sees concerning messages between a teen and adult, what should they do? Is there a clear line between discomfort and danger?
Again, I think unless the adult is going through the text messages or the direct messages, they may not know. But I think if you notice any changes in your child's behavior and they're a teenager, withdrawing, isolation, changing in their hygiene, the way they're eating, the way they're sleeping, their mood, who they're hanging out with, going out late at night, going out and being unaccounted for, I think it's important as a parent, without judgment, without shame, without humiliation, to talk to your child, to sort of say to them, what's going on? You're not acting like yourself. This is different for you. You're not talking to me. It's very important to do that. And I say this to parents all the time because I'm also a child and adolescent psychiatrist. And I say, when you can't stand to be around your child, when you feel like you're at the end of your rope, that is the time that they need you the most.
Wow. Very true. Well, let's talk about the perpetrators of these types of crimes. Other than, what we're seeing here with text messages or potentially emails, do perpetrators often leave any other type of trail, or are they usually very calculated in hiding their intentions?
So if they're cold and calculating from the beginning, they may hide text messages. They may have a burner phone. They may do things to hide the nature of the relationship. They may say to the person, listen, don't text me. We should only talk on the phone and not text. Very often, there are people who have problems in their own relationships with adults. They feel inadequate. They feel impotent or incompetent in adult relationships. And the only relationships they're able to negotiate are the ones where they have power, where they have control. And so, with narcissism comes in a sense of entitlement, as you said, where this is owed to me. I can do what I want. I'm in control here. I have the power. And they use that power and they manipulate and they control.
Well, let's talk about the suicide part of this. When someone kills themselves after committing murder, is that a sign of guilt, shame, or something else entirely?
For me, that is a sign of someone who is totally overwhelmed, who feels like there's a complete lack of options, who's hopeless, who's desperate, and feel that there is no other way out. This is the only way. This is what it's come to, and this is what I have to do.
In your experience, do these individuals typically plan both acts, or is the suicide often impulsive after the initial crime?
So I've actually seen both. I've seen ones where it's planned, and I've also seen ones where the person goes over there just to have a conversation, and things start to escalate. And unfortunately, impulsively, sometimes under the influence of substances, they act out on the spot.
I guess what my next question, every situation is different, and I realize that, but just the warning signs, because we report on these stories, I feel like every other day almost. We hear so much about these murder suicides and they just keep happening. But what are the typical warning signs that we can look out for when it's like, man, this person is very dangerous. I have to get out of this situation?
So I think if it's me and I'm dealing with someone like this, I look at the fact that they are not taking no for an answer, that they are becoming increasingly fixated, that they are saying things that are more and more concerning. They may be talking about killing themselves. They may talk about threats to you as a person. When you start to see things like that, that's when I think you need to get help, because it's scary, but you just don't know what people are capable of. And you often don't know their history, right? With people, you only get two things: what they show you and what you want to see. So when you start seeing warning signs early on and you start to back off, and that person is not taking no for an answer, and the more you pull away, the more they come towards you, to me, that is a red flag of someone who is very emotionally dysregulated, may have some sort of personality disorder, whether that be narcissistic personality, borderline personality, and that to me is a red flag.
Her stepfather came home and discovered both bodies. I mean, I cannot imagine the trauma. What kind of psychological toll does that take on a family member who walks into a scene like that?
So listen, trauma is not an on and off switch, it's a process. He may take years to recover from it, and he may never completely recover. My guess is his life will never be the same. Unfortunately, I have treated a lot of individuals who have lost their kids either from an accident or, unfortunately, as a victim of a crime. And these are people whose lives are completely redefined. It's like a thermostat on their AC. They have to completely change everything and it never goes back to the way it was. And they have very, very limited capacity for joy after these things happen. And it takes years to ever find peace inside their head. So I can't even imagine what this stepfather is going through.
Right. All we can do is hope that he gets through it, whatever that means in whatever way that could possibly happen. Well, before we let you go, Dr. Bober, I have to ask, the district says that the coach passed all the background checks, but clearly something went very wrong. Also, I must add, he didn't work directly for the school. He was a volunteer coach but he coached students that went to the school. From a mental health and behavioral lens, are background checks enough to catch red flags?
They're not, but I don't know that it's practical to do it any other way. Remember, these are not police officers. These are not foster parents. These are coaches. And so the background check probably involves something very, very superficial, like a criminal background check. Maybe they checked for references. But listen, sometimes people go rogue. There's all types of rogue people. There's rogue doctors, there's rogue police officers, there's rogue lawyers. It happens all the time. So there's only so much you can do on the front end, and it's really just a screening. So people can slip below the radar, and obviously that's what happened in this case.
In your view, should mental health evaluations be part of the vetting process for volunteer coaches or people working with teens or any children?
So this is what you would call a low base rate phenomenon. It probably happens very infrequently. And so I don't know that it's practical for the system to do that. But all you can do is do your due diligence, make sure the person doesn't have a criminal background, try to speak to people that know the person, and obviously maybe speak to people that they didn't pick for you to speak to and see what kind of character this person has. But even with all that, even when you're careful, things still happen.
Right. Very, very sad story here. Well, Dr. Bober, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much.
A GoFundMe has been set up to help support Gwen's family. For Law and Crime, I'm Kennedi Walker.